In 1934, a dream to conquer Nanga Parbat became a fight for survival, where avalanches thundered, storms raged, and one of history's greatest Himalayan tragedies unfolded in the shadow of the killer mountain.
It's 2:20 a.m. I'm still buried in the Himalayan Club journals, century-old field notes from the Himalayas. It's like diving deep into the documented history of the Himalayas from the early 1900s. The journals cover everything, from indigenous wisdom, cultural myths, to epic expeditions and groundbreaking discoveries. These forgotten stories are brought to life by synthetic voices in the Himalayan Journals podcast. Subscribe, zone out, binge, and pass it to a fellow mountain junkie.
On the 1st of May, 1934, the German Himalayan expedition to Nanga Parbat gathered in Srinagar, ready to begin. The following day, under Willie Merkl and Freya, the first party set out with 400 coolies. A second party, led by Wieland, Schneider, and Captain R.A.K. Sangster, followed with 200 more. By May 10th, after crossing the Tragbal and Bösel passes in deep snow, both parties reached Astor. 4 days later, they spent a night at Rakiot Bridge, and on May 18th, they arrived at a temporary base camp after a stiff climb up the Rakiot Nulla. Here, deep snow and bad weather delayed progress. By May 22nd, the team began carrying supplies and digging out the site of the 1932 base camp. Conditions were grim. The camp was little more than a hole in 12 feet of snow, enlarged each day to pitched tents. On May 26th, Wieland, Bechtold, and Mühlritter moved up to a camp below the northern wall, aiming to photograph the great avalanches that thundered down the 12,000-foot face. Wieland soon returned with encouraging news of snow conditions and pressed for an immediate attack. Schneider, Aschenbrenner, and Porters followed, and soon after Welzenbach and Drexel headed towards Camp 4, though the weather remained unstable. By June 4th, Camp 2 was established, precariously situated among the chaotic ice towers of the Rakiot Glacier. Later, dangerous fissures forced them to move the camp, but it had to remain in use as porters could not manage the climb directly from Camp 1 to Camp 3. 2 days later, Camp 3 was set after a hard struggle through broken ice fields where old routes had shifted with the glacier. On June 7th, Drexel, weakened by illness, was persuaded to retreat. He reached Camp 2 in exhaustion. Dr. Bernard hurried up the following day, but Drexel died that night of pneumonia. Wieland arrived too late with oxygen. The climbers and porters abandoned the mountain, and Drexel was buried near base camp on June 11th, facing the northern wall. In the days that followed, Wieland and Sangster climbed Buldar Peak to photograph the summit. Yet their progress was stalled when supplies of sampa, vital for the Darjeeling porters, failed to arrive. For nearly a week, the weather was excellent, but valuable time slipped away. On June 22nd, with food finally in hand, Merkl, Welzenbach, Bechtold, Mühlritter, Schneider, and Aschenbrenner set out for Camp 4. Sangster, Bernard, and Wieland joined them on June 28th. The climbers scaled West Chongra Peak, and discussions turned to the summit assault. Originally, 2 teams were to make the attempt in sequence. Shortages of fuel and illness among porters forced a change. Now, all 7 climbers and the remaining porters would move together. On July 1st, the first party set off for Camp 5, followed by the second the next day. Crossing Rakiot Peak proved harder than expected. 2 days of step cutting and fixed ropes were required before Camp 6 was established at 23,000 feet. From there, the team advanced past a rock spire they named the Moor's Head and pitched Camp 7 below the Silver Saddle. On July 6th, Schneider and Aschenbrenner cut steps to the saddle, reaching the broad plateau leading to the main peak. They even pressed across to the Fore Peak at 26,000 feet, the highest point reached. Yet, out of fairness, they returned and established Camp 8 near the Silver Saddle at 25,000 feet. That night, a violent storm descended. Winds tore at the tents, driving snow inside. The climbers endured without food, hoping the gale would pass. But the storm lasted into the next day, and then the next. On July 8th, with strength ebbing, Schneider and Aschenbrenner led 3 porters back, cutting fresh steps through blinding snow. They crossed Rakio Peak and by evening reached Camp 4, believing their comrades had stayed behind at Camp 5. The storm raged for 3 more days. Only on July 10th did frostbitten porters straggle into Camp 4 with news of disaster above. Gradually, the grim picture emerged. Wayland collapsed near Camp 7 and never rose again. Merkl and Welzenbach clung on with their porters, starving, frostbitten, and trapped. Welzenbach died in Camp 7 on July 12th or 13th. Merkl, with Gaylay and Angsering, staggered as far as a snow cave near Camp 6. Angsering performed a heroic descent to Camp 4 to seek help, but conditions made rescue impossible. Attempts on July 15th and 17th failed. By then the snow was shoulder deep, and the climbers below were too weak to go on. Merkl and Gaylay, foodless and frozen, must have perished by mid-July. The expedition had ended in tragedy. What began with hope and careful planning had been broken by storms and hunger on the slopes of Nanga Parbat.